Hi everybody, my name is Lauren and welcome back to Plants and Ting. In today's video, we are going to be talking about my fail-proof method, or my 99% successful way of transferring my plants from soil to semi-hydro. So let me know either by liking this video or in the comments below if you found this video helpful, because it may be a part of a mini series where I'll talk more about the different like soil substrates, my favorite soil mix, and then also more so about like troubleshooting, a transfer that you did and maybe something went wrong, how to figure it out. So let me know. So the first step in transferring a plant from soil to semi-hydro is you do nothing. You don't do anything just yet, you just think. Think about the plant. Is it a big plant or a small plant? Does it have fine hair-like roots, or does it have chunky udon noodle roots? Or how does it like to grow? Does it like to dry out? Does it like to stay moist? You just want to think, marinate in your mind the plant that you're planning on transferring, because thinking about all of that is going to help you in your actual transfer. And now, once you've thought about all those things, the next step is choosing the right substrate for your semi-hydro setup. There are several semi-hydro setups. My two main that I stay with are Leca and Pond. Those are the ones that I'm most comfortable with, but there are several. They all work in a similar manner where you're using that capillary action of the substrate to suck up water and release water and leave a reservoir when there is excess. So some people use straight pumice, you can use vermiculite. I'm gonna be speaking mostly on Pond and Leca today, because that is what I find readily available and accessible to me, and what I have the most experience with. So now that you've thought about your plant and you're ready to pick a substrate, if your plant is a bigger plant, I personally would choose Leca. It's a larger substrate. You can get more of it for a lower cost, so you're gonna be able to use a lot more of it for a larger plant. If it's a small plant, a baby plant, something that you just finished propagating but now you're ready to put in a permanent substrate, then maybe Pond is your option, because it's a smaller plant, the particles are smaller, and sometimes, not all the time, a larger plant may have a larger root system, and then a smaller plant may have a smaller, finer root system. Not always true, because I have like my begonia that's a beast, but the root system is super fine. So that's why you want to consider everything. So if you have something like a Hoya, where the root system is super fine, you may want to choose Pond. They grow well in Leca, but these are your options, So for me, something like a Anthurium, where the roots are super chunky, it can go either way, to be honest. You're really not gonna go wrong either way, but if you're trying to, sometimes we want a specific answer, sometimes I'm like that too. I need a specific formula and answer. So for me, small plant, small roots, small substrate; larger plant, larger roots, larger substrate. The other thing to consider before you make your final decision on which substrate you're gonna choose is how your plant likes to grow. If your plant likes to dry out, you might want to choose something like Leca, because for me, I have found that it dries out quicker and it's easier to see that it's dried out. Whereas with Pond, it's smaller, it can hold moisture a little more, and even though it may look dry around the outside, I've unpotted a plant and saw that the inside was still quite moist. So I choose Leca for my plants that like to dry out, or if I have a plant that's like kind of like very prone to root rot, I'll probably choose Leca, versus something that is fine, it loves to stay moist, then I'll probably choose Pond. One last thing to consider when you're choosing your substrate is, let's say you pick your plant, you've unpotted it, and the root system is minimal, or there was a lot of rot, and now you don't have as big a root system as you thought you had. Now maybe you'd want to choose something that's more on a propagation level. You can still put it in Leca or Pond, but maybe you want to choose chunky perlite instead, or maybe if it's a small plant, you want to choose fluval. So if you have a situation like that where your roots are just not hitting the way you thought it would be, this is the time to go for a propagation substrate. So now that you have your plant unpotted and you're ready to do something with it, you've picked your substrate, you have the option before potting it up into the semi-hydro to just put it in water. So you might want to do this if you find that you're really nervous about it, or say it's a really expensive plant, or you just don't know how the plant's going to react and you just want to see. You can place the plant in water for a couple of days. I would say 1 to 5 days, just to see how it reacts, and that'll give you a better idea. So let's say you're not sure, right? You really can't decide which substrate to put it in, but you don't want to choose the wrong one. It's not really a wrong one, but let's just say that's the case. You can just put it in water and see how it acts. So I'll throw up on the screen here, you'll see my calathea. It started bouncing back within a day. It was super droopy, floppy, it was hating life. Come to find out, it was in a super dense, like almost muddy soil. I rinsed that thing off, put it into water. The leaves are super firm now. So you putting in water is giving you a chance to observe the plant and see how it's reacting. See how the roots react. Are the roots starting to mush away and rot away? Is the leaves perking up or drooping? Like, you'll just get to see how the plant reacts so that you can know. That'll give you even better idea on which substrate to choose. One point I did fail to mention or go into detail on was rinsing of the roots before putting it into the water or your semi-hydro substrate. You do want to try to clear out as much soil as possible on the roots. Sometimes that is very difficult depending if how dense the soil is and stuck to the roots. You just want to do the best that you can, but at the same time you want to be gentle because you don't want to end up traumatizing the roots or removing that protective layer over the roots. When soil is left on the roots and then it's placed into semi-hydro or water, it can speed up the process of root rot, but it doesn't mean that you're going to lose the plant entirely. Say you see the roots starting to mush away now that you've put it in water. That's okay, because guess what? Most likely that would have happened when you put it into the semi-hydro substrate anyways, but now you can see it and you'll have the opportunity to trim the roots and clean it up before you put it in its permanent substrate. So like I said, it's just a nice little intermediate step. It's not necessary, and I personally don't do it that often, but there are certain situations like my calathea where I have done it just to see how the plant reacts, because I never had a calathea before and I know they could be finicky. So again, it's great for finicky plants. This intermediate step is also great for stressed plants. So say you imported a plant or you just got it in the mail or whatever the case may be, for whatever reason, the plant that you have, you can tell it's just not acting right and it's stressed, but you know that you need to repot it. Put it into water, give you a little bit of time to let the plant rehydrate, let it recoup, just watch how it behaves, and then you'll most likely be able to make a better decision on what to do with the plant. When putting it in water, you can just put it in plain water, or you can put it in, I use a nutrient solution. So the same nutrient solution that I use to water my plants is what I put it in. Some people like to use Super Thrive, some people like to use Liquid Dirt. I have not used Super Thrive before. I just put it in water, my nutrient water, and it seems to do perfectly fine like that. Okay, so you've picked your substrate, maybe you did or didn't do the water stage, but now you're ready to pot up your plant. As you can see in this video here, you will, like with soil, put your layer of substrate first, and then you will pot up the plant into the substrate and fill around it just like you would any other substrate, soil, what have you. Very much the same. One thing I will mention though, when I've used leca in the past, because it's so large in area, you'll see in this video, I kind of put the leca up kind of high around the petioles of the plants. If I was using pond, I probably would not have done that. My experience with pond in the past is that because it's dense and it holds moisture longer, I have experienced stem rot at the base where the petioles meet the substrate. And that's just because, like I said, it holds moisture. So, but when I use leca, I've never experienced that. So that's something to keep in mind when potting your plant into semi-hydro. If you're using leca, it's probably no worries about stem rot. But if you're using pond, you want to keep it kind of low, right at the level it needs to be, not high up around the petioles. You may or may not experience stem rot. So once you have your pot planted up, if this is your first time using semi-hydro, you don't have to put a water reservoir. You can just use it as you would normal substrate and water it when it gets dry until you feel comfortable with the substrate. I would suggest when you pot it up that your substrate already be moist, already holding water, so that you're not just putting it into a dry substrate and the roots may not have anything to pull moisture from, you know, until you decide to water it again. So definitely use a moist substrate. If you don't want to use a reservoir right away because it's your first time, that is perfectly fine, but you do want to watch it closely to see, which brings me to clear vessels. That is why I use clear vessels, so that I can keep a close eye on what those roots is doing. You can see quickly if things are rotting, if things are growing, if it's happy. Sometimes you can't always tell from the leaves, you know, and sometimes the reaction of the leaves is a little delayed. So that is why I like to have clear vessels. With clear vessels will come algae. It's kind of unavoidable. Like, you really may not ever be able to avoid that. If you're gonna have a clear vessel, you're probably gonna get some algae if it's getting a good amount of sunlight. Some of my plants that are on my black shelf, because there is no glass, it's the black shelves, the sunlight is not directly hitting the vessels, so it's not getting algae, which is great. But in other places it is. I mean, at this point, I just live with it, and I really don't care. If that is something that you do care about, you may want to consider putting a hole in your vessels. You can drill a hole in the side of your vessels. I think I have a clip of when I did that before. I don't do that anymore because I really don't flush out my vessels that much. But if you are concerned about algae, that is an option. You can put a hole in it and rinse it through and drain it whenever you see the water getting a little murky. So that is pretty much all that I do for my process of transferring my plants from soil to semi-hydro. I do this process every single time. I have had, I think I can say, I have had like 99% success rate. I say 99 because I have had a handful of plants where they either completely rotted away, the plant didn't die, I just had to reroot it, or I don't think I've lost, have I completely lost? Yes, I've completely lost one. I know one off the top of my head for sure I've completely lost in a transfer, but nothing major. Like I said, I do the same process, so that's what I wanted to share with you guys because it really does work most of the time, and it's all about observation. Just watch your plant, see what it's doing. You have, you know, some measure of control over what's happening. You just have to be observant. So again, if you found it helpful, please let me know in the comments below or press the like button so I know to continue this mini series about substrates and troubleshooting. And if you are looking for any more information on pond, feel free to watch this video here.